The first industry to benefit from Watt's steam engine was the iron tool industry. Wood was in heavy demand for construction of ships and buildings and for warmth, so manufacturers turned to coal. Railroads enabled factories to attract large numbers of workers and to bring in iron ore and coal.
Key issue 2. Why are situation and site factors important? Proximity to inputs. Manufacturers buy companies and individuals so they can sell them to people who purchase the product. Key factors are proximity to the market and the inputs being sold there. For inputs, plant location has to be as close as possible to the inputs, while the optimal plant location has to be closer to the customer for the proximity to markets. For example, a milk company has to be located near markets because they spoil faster than other products. Non-metallic minerals take up more than 90% of human use. For example, fertilizers. Metallic minerals are good conductors of heat and electricity. For example, fashioning. Oxygen, silicon, and aluminum are the most common elements in Earth's crust. Ferrous alloys contain iron and a non-ferrous one does not. Iron is extracted from iron ore. Important metals used to make ferrous alloys include chromium. Chromium is a principal component of stainless steel extracted from the chromite ore, 1 alpha, which is mined in South Africa. A bulk gaining industry makes something that gains volume or weight during production. A good example is fabricated metals of parts and machinery from steel and other metals, because it brings together metals such as steel and previously manufactured products to make a complex product. Beverage bottling is a good example of a bulk gaining industry because the end product is heavier than the raw materials used to make it. Single market manufacturers usually only have 1 or 2 customers. A good example is the YKK Zipper Company, because zippers primarily go to one industry. Perishable products are usually located near markets for rapid delivery. An example is a newspaper because it expires within a day and it's only for a specific location. Inputs and products are transported in one of 4 ways. 1 is trucks for quick loading and cheap labor, 2 is trains for longer travel, 3 is ships to primarily cross oceans, 4 is air travel for speedy delivery.
The world's 3 major industrial regions house 80% of the world's final assembly production, including 40% East Asia, 25% in Europe, and 15% in North America. Most assembly plants are clustered in these regions because most of the world's car buyers are there. Examples of one car maker for each region is Germany's Volkswagen in Europe, Japan's Toyota in East Asia, and Ford in North America. North America, most of the assembly plants are located in the interior of the U.S. between Michigan and Alabama. Labor cost is important for some industries, and the variation of labor costs around the world is large. China has around 1/4 of the world's manufacturing workers. The most important factor in the clustering of high-tech industries in California's Silicon Valley, even more important than to skilled labor, was proximity, the availability for capital. The capital high-tech industries have been risky propositions. Roughly 2/3 of them fail, but financial institutes have lent money to engineers who have good ideas to start communications and networks. Land factories are 2 stories. The raw materials were hoisted to the upper floors to make smaller parts. They were sent downstairs on chutes, pulleys for final assembly shipment. Factories are now located in suburban and rural locations. In Russia, there's 100,000 cotton yard production. Kazakhstan has 10,000. China has the most of all of them, which is 100,000. India has 100,000. Germany, France, and Poland and Ukraine have 1,000. Egypt also has 1,000. Peru and Argentina have 10,000. The U.S. has 10,000 and Mexico has 1,000.
Key issue 3. Where does industry cause pollution? The average atmosphere is made up of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, less than 1% argon, and 0.04% several trace gases. Air pollution is when the trace substances has a greater concentration than what is average. Most of it is generated by factories, power plants, and motor vehicles. From factories and power plants, burning coal produces sulfur dioxide and solid particulates. From motor vehicles, burning petroleum releases carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere. Air pollution can be studied at a global, regional, and local scale. At a global scale, air pollution contributes to global warming by heating up the earth too much and damage the ozone layer from CFCs being released. When looking at a regional scale, air pollution can ruin a region's vegetation and water supply through acid deposition. The sulfur oxide and nitrogen oxides made from burning fossil fuels combine with oxygen and water when in the atmosphere. When the sulfur and nitrogen come back as droplets, that would be acid deposition. When it dissolves in water and returns to Earth, it's acid precipitation. Acid precipitation damages lakes by killing fish and plants. On land, it takes the nutrients from plants and harms worms and insects. When looking at a local scale, air pollution is mostly severe in urban areas from a large number of factories, motor vehicles, and other polluters. The air is polluted mostly by carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and particulates. Carbon monoxide reduces oxygen levels in blood, impairs vision and alertness, threatens people that has breathing problems. Hydrocarbons in sunlight forms a photochemical smog, and it causes respiratory problems, stinging in eyes, and an ugly haze over the city. Particulates include dust and smoke particles, smoke from a factory, and exhaust from a diesel truck. The worst is when there's barely any wind, skies are clear, and there's a temperature inversion. When wind disperses pollutants, sunlight provides energy for smog, and the air is warmer at higher elevations. Solid waste pollution. 4 pounds of solid waste per person is generated daily. 60% from residents and 40% from businesses. It's mostly paper products in the US. Solid waste is mostly disposed in sanitary landfills in the US. More than one half is trucked there. An alternative has been to incinerate the waste to create more space, and it also provides energy. Some hazardous waste includes heavy metals, PCB oils, cyanides, strong solvents, and acids. In 2010, 3.93 billion pounds of toxic chemicals were released into the environment. For example, mining was the largest polluter. Water and the air can get contaminated, which can cause cancer, mutations, chronic ailments, and death. Manufacturers are heavy users of water. For example, the aluminum industry. Also, humans use water to drink, cook, bathe, and for activities. Location of pollution is divided into point and non-point sources. Point source pollution enters a body of water at a specific location. Non-point source pollution comes from a large diffused area. Point sources are smaller in quantity and easier to control. It comes from a specific point like a pipe. It is caused by water using manufacturers. For example, steel, chemical, paper products, and food processing. They use a large amount of water and generates wastewater. Another cause is municipal sewage. More developed countries' sewers carry waste from sinks, bathtubs, and toilets back into rivers or lake. Non-point sources come in greater quantities and harder to control. For example, agriculture. Fertilizers and pesticides are carried into rivers that can result in the death of aquatic life. The organic waste that is dumped into the water consumes oxygen and takes it away from the aquatic life. This results in the biochemical oxygen demand. This is caused by factories and power plants when they use water and send it back into a river or a lake.
Key issue 4. Why are situation and site factors changing? Changes within developed regions. Shifts within the U.S. Between 1950 and 2010, United States lost 6 million jobs in manufacturing, mostly in New York and Pennsylvania. However, they also gained 2 million manufacturing jobs in the South and West, mostly in the states California and Texas. During the industrialization, the South lagged because they lacked infrastructure due to the Civil War. The government encouraged the South by building roads and bringing electricity. The South had a huge labor force because they would rather work for less pay than to join the Union. Steel, textiles, tobacco products, and furniture industries were dispersed in small communities there. Right-to-work laws then lured many manufacturers to the South because it required factories to be an open shop, which means that the workers do not require to join the union. There are 23 right-to-work states that makes it harder for unions to monitor the factories. Textile production. They mostly open in lower-wage locations, and in the U.S., most textile and apparel production moved from the Northeast to the Southeast during the mid-20th century because of the low wage rates. They favored small towns such as the Appalachians, Piedmont, Ozark Mountains, and other more. Interregional shifts in Europe. In Europe, manufacturing diffused from northwestern Europe to southern and eastern Europe, and European government policies have encouraged this. The European Union structural funds provide assistance to convergence regions and competitive and employment regions. Convergence regions are regions that lag behind Europe's average, and competitive and employment regions are regions that have had significant manufacturing job losses in recent years. In Western Europe, Spain had the most rapid manufacturing growth during the late 20th century after its admission to the European Union. Catalonia is the leading industrial area in Spain and has had the largest motor vehicle plant and is the center of Spain's textile industry. However, Central Europe has become the major center of industrial investment since the fall of communism. The countries include Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary. Central Europe contains two attractive site and situation factors, which is cheap labor and nearby wealthy markets. Emerging industrial regions. From 1970 to 2010, North America and Europe, who were once 1/3 or 1/2 of the world's industry, are now only 1/4. In other regions, it changed from 1/6 to 1/2 of the world's industry. This is because of the change in labor, which is minimizing labor costs. Manufacturers are locating to where prevailing wage rates are lower than traditional ones. This is important because labor costs also affect how you would compete with other manufacturers. For example, in the US, mill wages $10 to $15 per hour, which are unable to compete with manufacturers in other countries, paying less than $1 per hour. Outsourcing. Transnational corporations divide jobs that need to be done by high-skilled workers in developed regions and low-skilled workers in developing regions to lessen labor costs. This is known as the new international division of labor. They do that through outsourcing. Outsourcing is turning over much of the responsibility for production to independent suppliers. An example would be an iPhone. Most profits go to the US, where Apple is based. Its parts are made in Japan, Germany, and South Korea by skilled workers. The parts are then put together in China, where it's cheaper.
Proximity to skilled labor. Skilled labor is important to industrial regions. Factories traditionally assign each worker a specific task, Fordist production or mass production. Today, most factories use post-Fordist production. 4 types of work rules distinguish post-Fordist production: teams, problem solving, leveling, and productivity. Just-in-time delivery. Proximity to the markets is important for many types of manufacturers, but now even more because of just-in-time delivery, parts that come just in time. There are 3 types of disruptions: labor unrest, traffic, and natural hazards. A global industry. What is an American car? Vehicles can be assembled in other countries, but sold in the US. Example, Ford. Some vehicles are made and sold in the US. Example is Toyota Camry.